some of the people I work with, some of you have been asking me between the scenes, what have you learned at your time in America, Trevor? What have you learned at your time? And, I would never pretend to understand America, in the relatively short time I think I've been here. I don't think I know much about anything the more I learn, funny enough. But when I thought about it, I realized there were three main lessons that I've learned in my time, being privileged enough to host the show that you've been wonderful enough to watch. And the first lesson I learned is something that took me a long time to realize. Issues are real, but politics are just an invented way to solve those issues. Don't ever forget that. I in the very beginning also got sucked into the whole Republican, Democrat, and it's like, oh, this is the way it should be as a Republican. Yet it's not actually the way it should be. It's not even the way it is. It's not a binary. They're not just two ways to solve any problem. They're not just two ways to be. I'm eternally grateful to a man who I met as a stranger, funny enough, and he said something really beautiful to me. We're walking through Harlem, and he said to me, Trevor, one of the greatest lies they tell you in America, they tell you that America is two political parties, Republicans and Democrats. And he said, but I'll tell you now, it's Republicans, Democrats, and it's black people, and every other person of color who's trying to make a name or do something for themselves. And that stuck with me, and it made me think about American politics differently. It made me realize that we get tricked a lot of the time, not just in America, but everywhere in the world, into liking or not liking something based more on the tribe that it comes from, the tribe that it emanates from, than what the idea actually is. It's whether they put that little R or that D next to somebody's name in a newspaper article that defines how you feel about it, when in fact, somebody that you may not agree with on most things can do something that you like. They could do something that you agree with. And I think as we live in a society where we increasingly introduce ourselves with the things that separate us, we forget that real friendships come from the similarities, and then the disagreements are how we polish each other as human beings. I'm not saying you'll agree with everyone, don't get me wrong. It's not like kumbaya and everything works. I'm not saying that, but just remember that. Like Trump did prison reform. I'm not saying now you should like him, but it doesn't mean you have to hate the prison reform that he did. You could be like, I hate this guy, but I'm not going to be there like, Your Honor, I should get a longer sentence because Trump did this shit. Issues aren't Democrat or Republican. That's all I'm saying, and that's all I wish I could have said a lot more clearly on the show. But sometimes in the country, the way the news is told, the way it's delivered to you, it makes it feel that way. But it's not. Clean water isn't a Republican or a Democrat issue. Affordable housing isn't a Republican or a Democrat issue. I don't care what party you are. You're probably struggling to pay for your rent. You're probably struggling to own a house or to buy something. Crime is not a Republican or a Democrat issue. It's oftentimes something that New York Times just reports on because they listen to everything the police say. But that's another story for another day. Politics is transformed into a giant game of football, it feels like. And just like football, it turns everybody's brains to mush. But don't forget that. Every time you think of an issue, don't think of it through the lens of Republican and Democrat. Forget that for a moment. Think about it as a human being, and then figure out which person in power is actually trying to do what you think needs to be done about that issue. The second lesson I learned is never forget that context matters. Never forget how much context matters. I feel like we live in an age of limitless information right now, but we never seem to acknowledge that there's a shortage of context. In many ways, it's why I started doing Between the Scenes. I realized in the short time I have on the show, there's only so much I can convey as a message. And that message is, I understand, distilled and synthesized for people, but we process everything in bites. And we don't realize that we have a lot of information, but we don't have the context that is so necessary for us to to process that information, which is so important. Context is everything. It's truly everything. We have information, though. We know about a flood in Pakistan in a way that we never would have known before. We know about protests in Iran. We know about what the troop movements are in Ukraine. We know about a drought in parts of, Sudan. We know all of these things. We know who Pete Davidson is dating now. Sometimes I feel like we know it before he does. Yeah, he's just like, what? I am sweet, but Yeah, but we don't have the context oftentimes when we make a decision, is what I started realizing. You know, we see a clip, a video, it's designed to make us angry, we respond to it accordingly. We don't know how it started, we don't know how it ended, we don't know what the actual story is. And context is so important for everything, for every conversation, if you think about it in life. You know? You see it makes you angry, you don't wonder why it makes you angry, you don't even know if it was designed to make you angry. I've realized it's so important to protect yourself from that. Try and find the context wherever you can. Ask as many questions. And it may slow you down in being able to make a decision. It may slow you down in being able to form a take, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we shouldn't have an opinion immediately. Maybe we should wait and see what happened. See what the context is. You don't know what the video is. You know, we all see these videos. So that video of that raccoon attacking that little girl. It was terrible. But we don't know what she did to the raccoon. You know? Maybe she sold the raccoon some cocaine and it wasn't cocaine. And the raccoon was like, shit, this is flour. Ah! You know? I think context is everything. And I've experienced it in many ways firsthand. I remember when I started the show, you know, there were so many people, they hated me. They genuinely hated me. They hated the idea. They hated how I looked. They hated my hair. They hated my accent. They hated everything about me, my point of view, everything. And then I look 7 years later, and now those people still hate me, but for the right reasons now, because now they know me. They understand me. And obviously there's people who love me, and I appreciate all of you who come out and enjoy the show with me. But just remember, without context, nothing makes sense. Whether it's international traditions, norms, customs, we all think it's normal because we are in the place that we're in, but as the world becomes smaller, we're also going to compress everything that we think is right and is normal, and it's going to create a little bit of tension. You know, there isn't one way, and we don't know what the one way is. You know, context, people, please just don't forget that. It's like how if you joke about your own mom, then it's funny, right? But if I joke about your mom, then it's hilarious. There's a difference. You know? And I guess the final lesson I learned at the show, and I learned it not at the show, but because of the show and the news I was covering, is please don't forget that the world is a friendlier place than the internet and the news will make you think. Yes. Just don't forget that. You know, I've been really lucky to go out and, you know, my comedy has taken me to places and to people. I've been lucky enough to do comedy from Florida all the way through to, you know, Washington State. I've been lucky enough to travel around the world and meet people, and people are a lot friendlier than social media would have you believe. You know, I've had people who are Republican voters who come to my show because even their kids brought them and they go, I didn't know I would laugh and I had a good time and I may not agree with you, but maybe this, but they see me as a human. Maybe I talk to them, I see them as a human in a way that we didn't before. People are a lot friendlier than they'll have you believe. The news is designed to tell you what is happening, and generally what is bad is what's going to make news, but not everything is bad. You know, some old ladies aren't just being punched everywhere in New York City at every corner, you know. Sometimes they're punching people. People are a lot better than they'll have you think. You know, we're all human beings, we're all trying to get somewhere, and at the end of the day, we're all just trying to smash.